I don't know if Danny told you that I was at the beginning of the specialization, at the very, very, very beginning, you know, when they say, you know, in the beginning everything was chaos, and then on the first day we created the materials we thought of, and then the second day, and then finally you guys started coming in 2012, right? But we started working 4 years before. So I'm, just as the other colleagues, I feel very close to this specialization, and it's always very nice to see the ending of a process. We know it's been as always, it's a very complicated process because just the online medium is already a very difficult thing for most of us, and I certainly include myself in the group of people who are a little bit challenged technologically, and we have a hard time working with technology. So anyway, I'm waiting for Ivan to come.
He's right there.
I haven't seen you, Normita. Sí, nos puedes saber. So, anyway, I'll try to be brief. We thought it would be nice to have something with content to give to you as a last gift, you know, something just like Ricardo gave his talk, short but sweet talk this morning. And now I'm going to try to be also short and sweet because I know you're tired, you have to go, you want to eat, whatever. You want to celebrate, you want to go dancing, etc. So, you know, I certainly sympathize with that, and I am going to try to make it short but sweet. But I do want to tell you something. I want to share with you things that I find are the meaning of life as far as I'm concerned, which is, you know, why we learn a language, why we communicate, what's the nature of communication, and how this has to do with, or how this works into us being teachers. I'm also extremely interested in us as a group, as a professional group, being the best we can, and really, you know, touching the lives of people. So the first thing I want to ask you is, you know, what have you learned? We don't have too much time, but I do want to ask you, maybe a few people, you know, what have you learned? All of you came here to the specialization already with teachers' courses, with experience, and so what is it? Was there anything new under the sun that you felt you actually learned in this specialization? Or did you just suffer through it? One or two people, can you give me some feedback? One idea, two ideas. Nothing, you're just so tired? Okay, yes.
The intercultural component that we have to mix it, we have to include it all the time. Like I told my colleagues I was aware of it, but I would just do it like this, an isolated part, like a type of a capsule, but didn't quite understand how I had to include culture.
Beautiful. I love that. Thank you very much. Yes. Culture is very often seen just as breviario cultural, and we want to show, we hope that we were transmitting some ideas about how culture really is everything, is a shift in views, language views, in habits, and you know, it's a very complex topic, so thank you very much. At least one other person. Yes.
Yes, it's not something that you learned. It's not that you learned something new, but you realize that you need to improve your teaching because you reflect a lot. You reflect about your own teaching and you realize that you have to move on. that maybe you knew about these approaches and theories, but you're not doing enough, especially since education has changed and children are more active. You also have to be, you have to teach them in a different way.
Thank you very much. The component of reflective teaching is one of our axes, one of our ejes de trabajo that we really try to, as you notice, everything you had to be thinking about this. Very good. So just another, what do you think will stay with you? You know, my father used to say, education is what remains after you forget everything you learned. Right? I think that's a very wise thing. No? What do you think will stay with you after you get over this 1 year of working? Any take on that? Maybe reflective?
Interaction with my peers.
Yes, wonderful. And we are really hoping, we say that every year, but I think, Danny, we have to do this, create like a network for communication, for helping out, for gathering ideas, and for sharing, and just in general. It's so important to create community, right? We know that it's extremely important. We're social people, and as Ricardo showed this morning, knowledge society really requires collaboration. So that's definitely a pro. Collaboration that will not, be misused, because that's the reason why people don't collaborate, is because they're afraid of other people stealing their ideas. People are zealous of their knowledge, and it's understandable. So we have to create a whole situation, context of interaction where collaboration is something positive and doesn't hurt you. It only enriches you, right? So anyway, as you know, my wish for you, that I hope will be good for you, is that you feel you can reflect on your teaching and be better and better classroom teachers, enabling students to gain confidence communicating in English with accuracy and fluency. Above all, I hope you enjoy your teaching more and more and always feel a sense of wonder when you see your students' improvement. There are many other things we can say, but I think there's nothing more exciting as to see the student that didn't know something, and then at the end of the year they're talking. I think that's why we teachers don't need big mansions, we don't need helicopters, we don't need big cars, because we get our highs with those things, right? Okay, so I just want to go over a few concepts from the very, very beginning in Unit 1, and it's one of my pet things, which is what do you learn when you learn a language? So we went over this, that over the centuries, really, or since the notion of grammar was invented, people kept on just saying learning a language, especially in the 19th century, learning a language is syntax and vocabulary, grammar and vocabulary. But then linguists themselves, beginning with Jacobson, started saying, hey, wait a minute, language is not so linear, it's very multidimensional, and we really have to be thinking of the model of communication, right? Which is, you have a speaker, or an emisor, receptor, a speaker and a listener, you have a message, a context, and as we know, context is essential. If you say, I love English, okay, I love English, yeah, I love English, but if the teacher is being very nasty and the student all of a sudden, I love English, yeah. Well, that's not true, so the relationship with what you say and the truth can be very complex, sarcasm, the context. If you ask somebody, where are you from? That's a very innocent question. But if you're you're crossing the border into the United States and somebody asks you, where are you from? You have to be extremely careful about how you answer that question. So the context of interaction is extremely important. And those are the elements that have been coming in to thinking about language since, let's say, the 20s or 30s or 40s, more or less. And it started growing in importance in the 60s especially. So, and then, as you know, we now in many ways, we're in a communicative approach paradigm, although people are talking about post method and all sorts of things, but I really haven't seen any big difference in now between what's been said in the early 70s about the fact that what we're learning to do when we learn a language is learning to communicate, right? And so we have, I put here a few of the exponents. We have influence, it should be there, linguistics. In linguistics, but the linguists that weren't into only syntax. Chomsky had a great influence on linguistics, but definitely not in language teaching. And he himself said it. He said, whatever I'm talking about has no implications for language teaching. He's not right. He actually, many of his ideas have permeated into the language teaching scene. But the truth is that he has no model of communication, and he still doesn't have a model of communication at this point. The people who got into that were Saussure, Ferdinand of Saussure, and Peirce, Charles Peirce, and the whole semiotics, Emile Benveniste is somebody that's not even mentioned in your materials, and I'm a big fan of the Benveniste and Grammaire de l'énonciation, and I'll explain to you in just 1 minute, because I really want to go over this very quickly. I don't want you to go party, okay? But I did want to say this, and Delheims, of course, is extremely important in this opening up the view of language as a social element, and then there's analytic philosophy, and then pragmatics, which one would never imagine would have a big impact on language teaching, but it certainly is. The whole notion of language functions is directly related to John Austin's work in the early 60s from analytic philosophy, where he showed, he was thinking about the problems in philosophy, about how when you say something, it either has a truth value or a false value. And again, as Ricardo mentioned this morning, it is very important to be distinguishing between true news and fake news, right? So truth and falsity is very important, but he's the one who started saying, wait a minute, statements, what we say, are not necessarily linked to the truth value of things, but to the action that we create with what is said. Something as simple as, would you like to come to the movies with me, is an invitation. There's no truth value. It's not true or false. It's true that I'm inviting you, but there's not a truth value. The value of what is said is that it's an invitation, right? So he's instrumental, and believe it or not, good old Aristotle with rhetoric is also important in our field. Just going over very quickly, models of communication. One thing that's very important is with Saussure and Peirce. Here, they were showing how, actually it's more like Peirce. There's not a direct relationship between the outside referent and what you say. Monolinguals very often think, they think there's a direct relationship between a word and its meaning and the actual object, like chair is a chair, it's a chair. And it's only bilinguals that begin to understand that there isn't a direct relationship between what you say, between language and the actual outside world. And it's easier then to understand that you actually construct, that it's a socially constructed process. Language is a socially constructed process. And with Himes, he was showing how the complexity of interaction is there. It's setting and scene. There's an act sequence. There's a key. There are instrumentalities like the modality if you speak or write or do audiovisual that always is impacting the meaning of what you're saying. The norms, what you're allowed to say when and where is also impacting the meaning of things, and you can get into a lot of trouble if you say things in the wrong context, right? You can even get it going. Like, I remember a friend of mine, he was provoked by the question in when you're getting a visa for the United States, it says, literally, it used to say, "Are you planning to assassinate the president?" And he said, I was so tempted to say yes, and, because you get so irked, well, you don't do that, okay? And so, they're participants, but then it's the letter is very little, but he added, this is an ideal set. Everything is said in a context, a key instrumentalities, norm, but there can be conflict, and there are other linguists that will say any interaction always has a conflict. People say there's a cooperative principle in interaction, but there's also a conflict because you have to negotiate what it is that you want. Okay, it's a very complex idea. I don't want to get into it too much, but all of those things are aspects of communication that we want to take into account. Ivan? You have more models of communication, and just go very quickly for Austin and Searle. All of that was in your Unit 1, which I'm sure you have forgotten because you're now highly educated. But it's essential. For me, the whole notion of speech acts is so important for us in language teaching. He will say every statement has a locutionary, perlocutionary dimension. If I say, whatever, I love you. I love you is somebody is expressing an emotion to somebody. That would be the locutionary act. Illocutionary would be an expressing emotion, and perlocutionary is the impact it has on the listener, which isn't necessarily the intention of the speaker. I don't know if I'm sure it's happened to all of you very often that you say something and you realize the other person interpreted it another way. It's always, the perlocution, the effect, the communicative effect is different from your intention. So that is something that's also very important. Not getting into Aristotle, which was, I also liked very much the whole idea of ethos, pathos, and logos, but start reading on it. It's fascinating. And Benveniste, he has this idea, which for me is essential. Everything we say, or everything that's said, there's always a positionment, un posicionamiento. You say something, and it'll say things about yourself, about your construction of the other, and about the outside referent of the world. I thought I was making sure that it would be, yeah, right there, but yeah, you can't see it, my God. Like, can you see this here? In this one, one guy says something like, I'll see you tomorrow. That's a comisivo. I'm a committed. I say something and I commit myself to doing it. Here, and the directive is, go home, whatever, an order. That would be positioning yourself in face of the other, and then position yourself with regards to the outside world. Here it would be ironic, like this guy saying the weather is really great, and the weather is fantastic, right? And it's really cloudy and rainy or whatever. So, but it's a positionment. You're saying something about the outside world to the interlocutor. So just to go over quickly, these are the speech acts that Austin and Searle actually, Searle was the one who refined it, which to me are really, it's a tool. I'm always working with this idea. Assertives is you commit the speaker to something being the case. Like you say something, it's true, and it's true. It's my truth. Listen to Donald Trump, and and his idea of his world, and he's doing a lot of assertives. Directives is make the addressee perform an action, and remember the context is very important, because if how often does this also happen to you, right? Especially us moms or maybe us teachers. We give orders and nobody pays any attention to us, right? But, there's some people who they just, o sea, sus deseos son órdenes kind of thing. They just said, it's hot, and you immediately shut the window because, or you open the window because, whatever, So you need a certain number of conditions, and as Austin would say, you need felicity conditions for it actually to be an order. Even if you say it, it can only be an order if the circumstances are right for it. If you have the legitimacy as your role, for instance, to give the order. Commissives are committing the speaker to do something in the future. As I said, please, whatever. Write a project, a 50-page project for tomorrow, right now, okay? That's, no, I will do that tomorrow, okay? That would be the commissive. No, the directive, and then the commissive is I commit myself to doing this by tomorrow. And expressives are, as it says, thanking, apologizing, welcoming, deploring. And then declarations is when the word actually is the reality, is what actually creates the reality, like you're fired. Of course, it only works if you have the right to fire somebody. But you're fired at that very moment that person is fired, right? And they always, Austin and Searle always use the example of it used to be the priest, but now it's the civil servant that says, I declare you husband and wife. That's the very moment when the person, the couple is married, right? Those are declaratives. So in my opinion, those are tools that are very important for the teacher, because you're getting students, and that's the communicative approach and all of that. You're getting students to become actors of the language, and not just to know about the language, right? And if we see it in these packets, I find it, that's how I create materials, very useful to be thinking in those terms. And so basically, the idea is that we're going from a unidimensional linear view of language to a multidimensional nonlinear view with multiple layers of meaning, right? That's what we're doing. And I keep on feeling that the communicative approach has been around and already been there in the language teaching scene in Mexico already for a number of decades. But I keep on feeling that there isn't a real appropriation of this idea that you're really working with having students learn to do things with language, which is the way Austin mentioned. And so we're going from here, and then of course, sorry, but that also impacts the teaching of grammar, because the teaching of grammar, of course, it's a system. And of course, we want to work with the system. We have to teach them the system, and sometimes comparing English with Spanish is important. But more importantly, we want them to acquire the grammar so that they can communicate effectively. And so we have to think of ways to combine communication with language and learning of the system. I won't get too much into that. And now, because my talk was about language for communication and language for learning and thinking, and again, bring back to this morning's talk of critical thinking has always been important, but I think, people have caught on to the fact that if we want to have a world that's, less authoritarian and more rational, everybody needs to be doing critical thinking. We need to also refine those tools. And so when we construct knowledge, we're thinking of the outside. You saw the triangle. I'm talking about myself, I'm talking to other, or I'm having constructing a relationship with the other, but I'm also constructing an idea of reality, of an outside world. And we are in the premise that the outside world is also constructed in many ways socially. And our views of the world and how the world functions has to do with cosmology, with ideology, and with straight down facts, right? So we want to work with truth, objectivity, facts, schemes and models of interpretation, roles. Roles meaning, depending on who you are, you see things differently, right? But still, you want to believe that there's kind of a shared idea of reality, right? There are different research processes, conceptions of research, and different forms of communication within the construction of knowledge. There's a lot of literature already that shows that different disciplines construct reality in a different way, right? And so this is the idea that we have a model of communication, and within that model, we work with research and learning to be inscribed in a relationship with the outside referent, that in that triangle, the outside referent. And this is important for all of us who are working with content, right? Content, now we're, and in schools, people are encouraging maybe integrating English into like biology, like let's do some math in English, let's do some history or geography in English, and all of that is content. And so that's why I thought it would be an interesting topic. More interaction, interaction, the communicative part, you'd have directives like write your name, commissives, I'll bring it tomorrow, expressives, it's fantastic. But in the column of relating language for learning and thinking, you're having definitions. A speech act is descriptions, they work this way. Classifications, there are 5 types of acts. Explanations, this is because of this. Comparisons and contracts, arguments and theses, like I believe this is the way it should be, and because of this and this and this reason. And if you notice, I was engaging precisely in that. I needed to construct my object of study, so I needed to go over some of the theories of communication. If I hadn't mentioned any of these people, I would have been asserting things about the world that you might say, well, who are you to give that opinion? And so I had to resort to authorities who have been over the past 8 or 9 decades thinking about, and well, if you go back to Aristotle, that's like 3,000 years, no, 2,500 years. I mean, it's been a long time. So, does this ring a bell in any way? Mm-hmm. You're tired, I know. But just to pep you up, I gave you a little handout. Yeah, implications for teaching this. The communicative approach, I'll go over this very quickly, but then I'll go to the example. Communicative approach is linguistic competence, social linguistic, and strategic competence. Strategic competence is something that we always kind of forget, but it's the competence of being able to interact and be willing to take risks because of the nature of communication. The nature of communication is such that you don't know what the other person's going to say. You have to interpret it, and you have your own framework of interpretation. So we need to teach students they do that naturally in their native languages, but teach them if you just teach them language rules and sentence structure and vocabulary, it'll be very difficult for them to interact. It's definitely a proven fact. And many people will say, oh yeah, I used to always get 10s in French, but then I get to France and there was just no way I could understand people because they had no strategies for interaction. And very often they also don't get any. Not anymore. I think language teaching is getting better and better, fortunately. But before it used to be you just learn your grammar and then you can't even process the oral language. And the types of activities, communicative gap here is the very simple, the simplest kind of exercise is the most, in my opinion, the most powerful, the most useful kind of exercise because it recreates an idea of communication where you don't know what the other person's going to say. Mm-hmm. And anyway, good strategies and encouraging personalization, motivation to learn is very important, okay? So this is the little example. This is, are you familiar with Sean Lennon? Yeah. John Lennon's son. This is an interview that was made of him a few years back. I did a little exercise, and I want you to listen to the interview and be thinking of what he says. The question is, what is true beauty? Like, what is his idea of true beauty? So he's giving an opinion, right? It's a philosophical opinion. He uses, you notice how there's a little transcript also, you can see the transcript of what he says. It's oral language, and so you'll see how he said, I think, I feel, I believe, I don't believe. Those are elements of language that very often we forget to give and are essential precisely so that people can actually take a stance on what they are learning to say or what they want to say. So listen very quickly to this little interview, and we'll open to a few ideas. Okay.
Sean, welcome to Portugal. You're here promoting your latest album, Friendly Fire, which was recorded 8 years after your debut. Why such a long interval between records?
You need this, I forgot. Well, basically after my first album, I sort of felt that maybe I wasn't meant to play as a solo artist. I felt like I wanted to just experience music anonymously, without this sort of pressure of representing myself as a product. Do you know what I mean? But then after 8 years, I kind of felt like this was almost dishonest because I really wanted to publish the songs that I was writing. So I came to a point where I realized that I had to sort of be true to myself.
In Friendly Fire, love seems to be the main theme, at least in most of the songs. Is A Broken Heart the most inspired?
I don't know. I mean, I think everybody's different. I just sort of... I just chose to write about, you know, having a broken heart or, you know, the disintegration of a love affair, because I felt like it was an important moment for me, you know, in my life. It felt like I was transforming through like this difficult experience. I felt like I was becoming more of an adult, basically. And I think, to me, the most important stories are stories where people learn how to become themselves, you know. So in my case, it happened to be through this, and I thought it was worth writing about.
But it's something like the whole sadness about it. Is it something that attracts you, or could you just write about happy, lovey-dovey stuff just as well?
Well, for me, I don't really believe that life is just happiness, and I think that true beauty has a sadness to it. You know, I think the reason a sunset is beautiful is because there's some feeling of the passage of time. And you feel like life is, you know, passing, which is, it's not just a happy feeling. I think true beauty has to incorporate, you know, sadness in it. So I don't really even believe in happy-go-lucky concepts. I think these are things that are only used to advertise products and commercials, and it's a fantasy. But I think reality is, you know, more melancholy.
Friendly Fire is also accompanied by a film by the same name. How did this idea come together?
Well, basically, I was working on a screenplay with a friend of mine who's the director, Michele Civetta. I mean, we went to high school together, so we've been friends for years. And I always wanted to make a film, so I felt like if I asked this guy, who's one of my oldest friends, that he had to say yes, though he had no choice, you know. So I knew that he would do it for me. And I just felt like it would be a fun experiment to try and make something that wasn't just a commercial again, you know. Because most music videos are just commercials, you know.
Trying to sell the record.
And I felt like I had no chance in selling my music that way, because my music is not really designed for MTV anyway. So I felt like, why not just try to make something interesting in the same way that I made the music, I made the films, you know, just as a desire to express something interesting.
So, and then you got all your friends together and made this film?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I mean, I had to use my friends because they're the only people who are going to work for free, you know. And also, it's more fun for me to work with people that I have a relationship with, because it feels like it's a better atmosphere when you have an understanding with the people you're working with. I mean, that's how I like to work. I mean, some people don't work that way, but even in music, I prefer to play with people that are my friends.
Is it easier for you to have some doors open because of who your parents are, or is this something you struggle against?
And the truth is, of course, there are many doors that are open. I mean, most of the interest that I get in the media is only because of my parents. But
How do you deal with that?
well, I try to take advantage of it, because I mean, it's hard enough. So I mean, I have to use all the opportunities that are given to me,
And do you feel like people are expecting you to just follow your dad's steps, for example?
I don't know what people are expecting of me, and I don't really care. I think if you talk about doing what your parents did, which a lot of people do, I mean, there's only two choices you have in life, to either do what your parents do or not to do what your parents do. Then I am doing what my parents did, and I'm not ashamed of that. I think it's a cool thing to do. But in the end, the truth is, it's a little bit harder. I really believe that, because I think people are more judgmental of you, and I think that people see you with distorted eyes, with sort of distortion in their glasses or whatever. I really believe that because they're waiting to find some mistake. They want to see something wrong with you.
Like, look at him. He's just someone's kid and is not doing...
I really think they make it harder for you. But I'm not unhappy about this, because I feel like the more you struggle in life, the more you grow, So for me, it feels like this is sort of, it's a blessing in disguise, This is my life, and I'm living it, and I feel good about it.
Okay. Does anybody have an opinion about this little excerpt? Did you notice how he was saying, I feel, I don't think, I believe? What is his idea of happiness and beauty? I want to listen to some. Yeah.
He said that it cannot be only happiness in your life. There must be sadness. I understood in order to appreciate good moments, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. Any more ideas? Somebody over there? Hey, yes.
The thing I get from the little piece of the interview is that it means that life is not just happiness, but happiness is an idea made to serve things in commercial or something, and life, real living is more like melancholy and sadness.
Melancholy and sadness. Uh-huh. So I'm going to leave it at this because it is getting very late. The point is that we're not only talking about functions like, he's giving an opinion, but the interesting thing is his opinion, right? And then, of course, what you think of his opinion and how you think of you compare and you contrast. You notice how, as I was saying, he was defining, he had to define, he had to describe. Those are speech acts that are related to constructing an object of knowledge and then giving an opinion or arguing for or against. So this is what I consider very essential in language learning and teaching, not just your usual language function like hi, hello, or would you like to come to the movies, which is all very fine, but this whole area of content-based and learning to learn, using language to learn new things and think more is definitely an important area that I think we should all be working with. But I wanted to show that it was very much within the scope of the models of communication that we have been talking about. So thank you very much.